My mother left for Bali. She spent 40 minutes arranging her carry-on so her ring light wouldn't get scratched. She checked her camera batteries twice. She confirmed her hotel had reliable Wi-Fi for streaming. She did not say goodbye to me. I was 14 years old, standing in the doorway of my bedroom in socked feet, watching her move through our apartment with the focused energy of someone who had somewhere important to be. She did. It just wasn't here. My mother's name is Dana. She had, at the time, a little over 60,000 followers on her lifestyle account, where she posted coastal aesthetics, morning routines, and what she called intentional living content. There were photos of our kitchen with herb bundles hanging from the cabinet knobs she'd installed specifically for the aesthetic. There were flat lays of books she had never read. If you scrolled back far enough, you would find photos of me from when I was small, useful for a caption about slowing down and being present. By the time I was 10, I'd been quietly removed. She said I was camera shy. I had learned not to correct her version of things. My father moved to Portland when I was 9. He and my mother had separated the way two people separate when neither of them is particularly interested in fighting. Quietly, efficiently, with very little discussion of where I fit into the new arrangement. He called on birthdays. Sometimes he called on regular days, which I appreciated more than he probably knew. He paid child support on time. He was not a bad person. He was just someone who had decided that being my parent was a thing he did from a distance, the way you support a sports team you no longer follow closely. So it was just my mother and me in our apartment in Seattle, Washington, and a building with a gym she photographed but never used and a rooftop she photographed every season. I had been making my own school lunches since 5th grade. I managed my own orthodontist reminders. When the internet needed to be reset, I did it myself because she was filming. She liked to tell people I was mature for my age. She said it with the particular satisfaction of someone describing an outcome they'd engineered. Which I suppose she had. 3 weeks before she left, she called me into the living room and told me about the trip, the way you announce a schedule change, 21 days. A wellness retreat outside of Ubud, then a beach resort in Seminyak, then 3 days in Singapore for a brand partnership. It's a work trip, she said, which was true in the way that made it easy to say and hard to argue with. I asked who would stay with me. She looked at me the way she looked at a slow Wi-Fi connection. Brief, contained irritation. You're 14, Lily, she said. You've been taking care of yourself for years. This is the same thing, just longer. She left on a Tuesday. She did not hug me at the door. She reminded me that the building has a security system and that I should not let anyone in that I didn't know, which was the closest thing to a safety instruction she gave me. On the kitchen counter, she left 2 things, a white envelope and a small sticky note in her handwriting that said, "For emergencies." Inside the envelope was $80. I stood at the counter and did the math slowly. 21 days. $80. Just under $4 a day. I want to be precise about something because precision matters in this kind of story. My mother did not forget that money runs out. She is not unintelligent. What she did was calculate. And the calculation came out in her favor, as her calculations always did. She had set up a debit card linked to her account with parental monitoring through a budgeting app. Every purchase I made would require her approval. I discovered this on day 3 when I tried to buy groceries and my card was declined at the self-checkout. The app had flagged supermarket bulk purchase as outside the approved spending category. The approved categories were pharmacy, school supplies, and a specific food delivery app that she had disabled temporarily before leaving and never re-enabled. I stood at the self-checkout with a box of pasta and a can of tomatoes and listened to the machine prompt me to try a different payment method. The woman in line behind me was patient in the way strangers are patient with teenagers, which is to say barely. I put the pasta back. I kept the tomatoes because they were $1.29 and I had that in cash. I called my mother that evening. I could hear a gamelan ensemble in the background, distant and ambient, the kind of sound you hear in spa videos. I told her the card wasn't working. I told her I didn't have enough food. She exhaled in the way she exhaled when I said something she found tedious. You have $80, Lily. That's plenty if you're sensible about it. She said sensible the way she said most things, as a verdict, not a conversation. Then the background music got louder for a moment, and she said she had to go, and the call ended. That night I opened her account on my laptop. New post. My mother in a cream linen dress on a carved wooden daybed, a coconut drink in one hand, the jungle soft and golden behind her. Chose me. The caption read, 4,200 likes in 6 hours. I sat on my bed for a long time. Then I opened my laptop, created a new Google Doc, titled it with that day's date, and started typing. Day 3. Card declined at QFC. Called her at 7:14 p.m. She said I was being sensible. She was at a resort. I am not being dramatic. I just want there to be a record. I kept writing. I didn't know exactly why at the time. It felt like something that mattered, the way locking a door matters even when you're not sure what's on the other side. My neighbor across the hall was a woman named Mrs. Patricia Osei. She was 68 years old, recently retired from 30 years of teaching middle school English, and she had a Yorkie named Barnaby who barked at the elevator every single time it opened, which in an apartment building is frequent. She knocked on my door on day 6. I had not eaten properly in 2 days. I had been rationing the $80 with the seriousness of someone who has nothing to fall back on, which I didn't. When I opened the door, she looked at me the way experienced teachers look at children, not past them, directly at them, and said, I made lamb stew, and it's too much for one person, and Barnaby only eats kibble, so you'd be doing me a favor. I almost said I was fine. The words were right there in my mouth. Preloaded, the way they always were. But I was pale and my hands had been slightly unsteady all day, and she was looking at me with something I recognized as genuine, and I had not eaten a full meal in 48 hours. I said, okay, thank you. I ate 2 bowls at her kitchen table. She didn't ask questions while I ate. After, she made tea. She called strong enough to stand a spoon in, and set a mug in front of me, and said, how long has your mother been gone? Just like that, no lead up. I told her the truth. I told her all of it, including the card and the app and the call and the coconut drink and the caption. I told her because I was too tired to manage my own story, and because she had fed me, and because she was looking at me with the patient attention of someone who taught other people's children for 3 decades, and already understood that children don't usually say everything is wrong unless everything actually is wrong. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, I'm not going to do anything without your permission. But I want you to keep writing things down. Dates, what you ate, what she posted, what she said on the phone, every detail. She paused. And I want you to let me feed you. Every day, you don't have to ask. I nodded. I wrote in the Google Doc that night, Mrs. O.C. knows. She fed me. She said to keep a record. I think she's right. I went to school. This detail matters because my mother had arranged it months earlier. Not out of concern for my education specifically, but because a child in school by day is a child not generating any questions. I was in 9th grade at a public school 12 minutes away by bus. My English teacher was a man named Mr. Carver, who wore the same 3 cardigans in rotation and had a way of reading passages out loud that made them sound like he'd written them himself. He noticed things. He noticed I wasn't raising my hand, which I usually did. He noticed I fell asleep during independent reading on day 11, which was not something I had ever done before. He did not make a scene. After class, he asked me to stay back, and he asked one question. Are you sleeping okay? It was the smallest possible entry point, but something in the way he asked it, like the answer was allowed to be no, made my eyes sting in a way I had to work hard to contain. I said I was fine. He nodded slowly, the nod of someone who has heard I'm fine enough times to know what it cost the person saying it. He said, my door is open before school if you need somewhere quiet to sit. I used it twice. I didn't say anything specific either time, but I wrote in the doc, day 11, Mr. Carver noticed, didn't push, said his door is open. That was enough. On day 14 I collapsed during PE. Not dramatically. I didn't faint outright. I sat down on the gym floor during warm-up laps and couldn't stand back up, and my vision went strange at the edges, and the PE teacher called the nurse, whose name was Ms. Torres, and who put me on a scale and then asked in a flat, careful voice when I had last eaten a full meal. I said yesterday. She wrote something down. She asked where my parents were. I said my mother was traveling for work. My father lives in Portland. She wrote something else down. She brought in Mr. Carver, who had apparently been listed as an emergency contact by a previous counselor, which is a bureaucratic accident that I think about sometimes. He sat in the chair by the nurse's cot and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as careful. He said, "Lily, do you want to tell me what's actually happening?" I did not cry. I had not cried in nearly 2 weeks. But something in my chest loosened, the way a knot loosens when you stop pulling against it and just let the rope go slack. I told him, all of it. The same thing I'd told Mrs. Bitterance. OC, but this time, with the Google Doc open on my phone, which I showed him while I talked. 12 entries, 12 days of dates and timestamps and grocery receipts photographed in bad lighting and screenshots of my mother's posts, with their timestamps next to my logged meals. He looked at the phone for a long time without saying anything. Then he handed it back and said, "This took courage to make." He paused. "And it's going to matter." My mother called me that night. I could hear from the shift in her voice that the school had contacted someone. Her tone was the particular register she used when she was performing calm and feeling the opposite. "What exactly did you say to them?" she asked. I told her I hadn't said anything that wasn't true. There was a silence with a specific texture to it, the silence before something cold gets said. Then she said, "If this goes any further, you will come home to a very different situation. I've already spoken to your father and he is not in a position to take you, so I suggest you remember who provides everything you have." She hung up. My hands were shaking. I opened the Google Doc, started a new entry and typed the entire conversation from memory, word by word, including the part about my father. Then I screenshot the entry, emailed it to the doc's own shared link, and took a photo of the timestamp. Evidence is the thing that gets believed. Mrs. The thing that gets believed. Osei had said that. She was right. The school filed a report on day 15. I did not know this until a woman named Ms. Reyes from Child Protective Services knocked on my apartment door on day 17, carrying a canvas tote bag and wearing small silver earrings that caught the light when she turned her head. She was methodical without being cold. She opened the refrigerator and did not say anything about what was in it, which was a half-empty box of cereal, a jar of peanut butter, and 3 eggs. She looked at the trash, which held more context than I'd realized. She looked at the bathroom scale in the hallway and noted without commenting that it existed. Then she turned to me and asked, "Do you have anything you want to show me?" I showed her the Google Doc on my laptop. 22 entries, purchase decline screenshots, logged meals, a photo of the $80 envelope with the sticky note still attached, screenshots of my mother's posts, time-stamped, captioned. The phone log from day 5 with the call duration, 3 minutes, 40 seconds. My weight, which I'd been logging, which showed a drop of 8 pounds in 16 days. She read without speaking. When she reached the last entry, she was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up and said, "You're very thorough, Lily." She said it the way someone says something they mean. Then she asked a question that no adult had asked me directly and without preamble. "Do you feel safe?" I said no. Out loud, for the first time. The picture that assembled itself over the following days was, as Ms. Maya Reyes later described it in her report, detailed and corroborated. The Google Doc had 22 entries with automatic timestamps that matched my phone's location data, which matched the school attendance logs, which matched the nurse's medical note, which documented an 8-pound weight loss in under 3 weeks. A subpoena of my mother's financial record showed she had spent slightly over $38,000 in 17 days. Room service, spa treatments, a resort upgrade that cost more per night than our monthly grocery budget. The debit card monitoring app's own logs showed the approved categories had been deliberately configured before she departed. This was not an oversight. The app's activity log showed it had been modified at 11:42 p.m. the night before her flight. She had also, the records showed, checked her account's follower growth metrics from Bali 12 times on the day I called her. She had posted 4 times that same day. None of the posts mentioned having a daughter. She arrived home on a Thursday evening. She had arranged what she was calling on her stories a welcome home haul, a live stream where she'd unbox gifts she bought herself, show her followers her tan, and answer questions about the trip. She had promoted it for 2 days. By the time her rideshare pulled into our building's drop-off zone, she had 11,000 viewers waiting. She came through the apartment door with her ring light tripod already assembled, her phone in its gimbal, Live already running. I'm home, I'm so happy to be home, she said into the camera, spinning slowly to show the apartment. Her follower count ticking upward in the corner of the screen. Ms. Reyes was sitting at the kitchen table. 2 officers were standing near the window. I was on the couch with a blanket Mrs. O.C. had brought over because Mrs. O.C. had known what day it was. My mother stopped in the middle of the living room. The gimbal was still running. The ring light was still on. 11,000 people were watching her face go through something she couldn't perform her way out of fast enough. She looked at Ms. Reyes. She looked at the officers. She looked at me. She said, "This is a misunderstanding." Ms. Burse. Reyes opened a folder and began reading in a voice that had no particular drama in it. Weight loss, documented by school medical staff. Deliberate deactivation of emergency spending access. $38,000 in personal expenditure during the same period. No contact from any designated caregiver during the 21-day absence. Child left with $80 and no functioning means of additional support. Someone in the chat typed "What is happening?" Then someone else typed "Wait." Then the comments started moving too fast to read. One of the officers explained to my mother that they had a warrant. She looked at the ring light. She looked at the camera still running on its gimbal. She reached out and turned it off, which was the last decision she made freely for some time. She and my father, who, when contacted by CPS, had admitted he'd known she was leaving and had not made any arrangement, which made him complicit in a way that was both legally and personally devastating. Both accepted plea agreements. Felony child neglect. Probation. Community service. Mandatory parenting classes, which I thought was almost funny in a way that had no humor in it. The family court judge terminated both their parental rights at a hearing I did not attend because Ms. Reyes said I didn't have to. The judge's written decision used the phrase, deliberate and premeditated deprivation. She did not use dramatic language. She did not need to. My father called me from Portland 2 days after the hearing. He did not make excuses, which I had prepared myself for and found that I appreciated his not doing. He said, "I failed you. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for it. I'm not asking you to." He was crying. I did not cry. I told him I hurt him, and I meant it, and I also meant that I wasn't ready to say anything else. He said okay. We stayed on the phone in silence for a minute, which was strange and also somehow honest, and then I said I had to go, and I did. My mother's sister, Aunt Renee, had already submitted guardianship paperwork before the hearing. I had met her maybe a dozen times at Thanksgiving and one Christmas. She lived in a 2-bedroom house in Tacoma with a porch she'd painted sage green herself and a rescue greyhound named Humphrey, who was afraid of hardwood floors and walked exclusively on the rugs. She had a job she didn't glamorize, office manager for a dental practice, and she cooked dinners that were practical rather than photogenic. And she had a habit of leaving library books open face down on the arm of the couch, which my mother would have hated. It was the most normal place I had ever lived. Normal in the way I hadn't understood I was starving for. The way you don't understand you've been cold until someone puts a jacket around you and you feel what warm actually is. She came to my first cross-country meet in October with a handwritten sign that said, "Go Lily," in letters too big for the cardboard she'd found. She taped it to a stick with painter's tape. She stood at the finish line and cheered in a way that made the people around her smile. She asked follow-up questions about things I'd mentioned 3 conversations ago, which meant she had been listening, which meant she was keeping track of me in the way that matters. I kept waiting for some version of the moment when the patience would show its limit. It didn't come. I stopped waiting after about 6 months, which is maybe when I started to understand that some people actually mean it when they show up. I'm 26 now. I work as a paralegal at a family law firm in Seattle, which is not an accident. I went to school on a full academic scholarship, which I received 3 weeks after Aunt Renee taped my acceptance letter to the refrigerator with a smiley face magnet and said, I always knew, with the confidence of someone who had known me for 14 months. I study people who are in the middle of the worst situations of their lives, and I help the attorneys build the cases that get their children safe. The Google Doc habit turned out to be good professional preparation. I notice now in files what good documentation looks like and what it costs the person who made it. My mother's account was eventually deleted. Not by the platform, but by her. Her follower count had dropped from 60,000 to under 3,000 in the week after the arrest, which was recorded and discussed in ways she couldn't control. She resurfaced on a different platform 2 years later. Shorter content. Different aesthetic. No mention of having a daughter. I saw it once by accident while a coworker was scrolling. I looked at it for about 10 seconds. Then I kept doing what I was doing. She sent me a letter through the court system when I turned 21. She said she was in therapy. She said she was working on understanding what she had done. She said she was proud of me, and then, to her credit, she acknowledged that she had forfeited the right to say that. She said she was sorry. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten, careful. I read it twice. I put it in a shoebox in my closet. I haven't written back. I think about it sometimes. I think about what it would mean, what I would be giving and what I would be taking back, and whether those are even the right ways to think about it. The decision is mine. That took me years to fully understand. That some things belong to you even when everything else was taken, and that the right to decide your own next move is one of them. She left me with $80 and a card she knew wouldn't work, and the expectation that I would be too ashamed and too afraid to say anything. She calculated that a quiet child would stay quiet under pressure. She was wrong about all of it. I want to ask you something, because this is the kind of story that doesn't end when I stop talking. Have you ever been in a situation where the person who was supposed to protect you made you feel like the problem? Where speaking the truth felt more dangerous than absorbing the harm? I'd like to know what you did with that. Some of us found our way to the other side slowly at real cost by holding on to something small, a Google Doc, a neighbor's kitchen table, a teacher who left a door open. If that's you, I want you to know that the small thing was enough. It was always going to be enough. You just had to keep adding to it until someone finally looked.